Hey everybody, so when patch 10.2 released, I made a Disc for Dummies guide for Mythic Plus, but now with a lot of keys under my belt and a chance to play a lot of the new Discipline Priest with Forset, I wanted to make some slight updates to my original guide. I do think the original guide is a great place to start for Disc Priests, and I'll link it in the description below so you can check it out. However, in this video I want to give you guys an update on talents and talk a bit more about rotation. So let's start with talents. What I've got on the screen right now is what I'd consider the cookie cutter build for Disc Priest in M+, and what I'd probably recommend most people go ahead and run. This is really standard and includes Divine Aegis and 2 points in Harsh Discipline. This is the build I will be leaving in the description below. There are a few variations on this build I want to talk about, so let's check them out and see if any of them suit your playstyle better. First of all, you could opt for Power Word Life. This is what I recommended in my original guide. I consider Power Word Life to be a bit of a crutch though, and I do think you're better off with the value you're going to get over the course of an entire key by taking Benevolence for the added 3% healing, especially following the recent 3% DPS and healing nerf to Disc Priest. For those of us that have been playing Priest all expansion, it can be a little uncomfortable to drop Power Word Life, but it doesn't heal anywhere near where it did prior to the patch, when it was almost like a lay on hands to a low health player. Now, I think you're just as well throwing a Surge of Light flash heal on someone, or even directly pumping a Penance into them and avoiding that talent. Still, it's not awful. It can be a nice emergency button when someone is falling unexpectedly low. In my original guide, I also recommended Ultimate Penitence, and most people who take this ability are dropping Divine Aegis for it. Ultimate Penitence has really fallen out of favor with a lot of Disc players due to its long cooldown and the uncomfortable position it puts you in, floating up in the air for 5 seconds and then dropping you into who knows what. However, I don't think this ability is all bad. It does cover something that Disc otherwise lacks, which is just a big HPS cooldown that requires 0 preparation to execute. If you're not always on top of your atonements and sometimes just need a get out of jail free card, UP can actually be that for you. You will need to be a little bit choosy on when you use it so as not to die from mechanics while you're airborne, but if you're just starting out or you're not 100% confident in getting your atonements out on time, I don't think this is a terrible play. Another build that's been gaining popularity, especially among really high key pushers, is Twilight Equilibrium, which again is sacrificing Divine Aegis in favor of TE. I personally cannot stand the TE playstyle, and I was thrilled to see we'd be dropping it at the beginning of the patch, but clearly this build has some serious merit given the level of keys it's being run in. Twilight Equilibrium basically gives your abilities a 15% damage boost if you can successfully weave back and forth between Shadow and Holy spells. So in taking this talent, you're going to be changing your Shadow Covenant rotation from Mindbender, Mind Blast, Penance, Shadow or Death, Halo, Repeat, to basically those same spells but weaving Smites and a Holy Nova in between. I haven't tested the actual numbers, but I do assume that this build is a slight DPS gain. Your new Mindbender rotation would be something like Mind Blast, Smite, Penance, Smite, Halo, Smite, Shadow or Death. I don't actually run this talent because, like I said, I really dislike the playstyle, but clearly it's more than viable. I believe you're going to lose Torments from your Mindbender with this build overall, but likely make up the DPS with the raw 15% damage increase, which means you need to be executing the rotation properly. I've even heard some people squeezing in Expiation, but honestly, guys, my opinion about that and Twilight Equilibrium is that personally, I think you're better off playing an easy to execute, straightforward build and playing it correctly than playing some super complicated min-maxy style to squeeze out a teeny bit more DPS unless you're really pushing bleeding edge keys. So I'm going to proceed with the guide as though you're playing the cookie cutter build. I also wanted to shore up some things I talked about in the original Disc for Dummies guide when it comes to rotation, both healing and DPS wise. I may have said this in the original guide, maybe not, but either way it bears repeating. This is a Smite spec, friends. Smite is such a critically important spell to be casting as much as humanly possible at all times. Discipline Priest is currently all about your Mindbender. You do silly healing when your Mindbender is out, and you can have your Mindbender out a silly percentage of the time, and this all comes down to Smite. When Mindbender is on cooldown, each Smite is reducing that cooldown, as well as the cooldown on your Penance, which, you guessed it, reduces the cooldown of your Mindbender. When your Mindbender is up, your Forset is casting Smite twice, both of which are reducing the cooldown of your next Mindbender. So squeezing in as many smites between those torment spells as you can is critically important. In theory, with no movement or need to cast any other spells, which is obviously very, very rarely the case, you can reduce your Mindbender cooldown to about 6 or 7 seconds, and that's not totally realistic, but you should 100% be aiming to reduce that cooldown as much as you possibly can, because Mindbender is where a massive portion of your healing comes from. I'll also add that when I feel off or I don't feel like I'm playing as well as I could be, it usually comes down to me reminding myself that I need to press Smite more. This usually helps me get back on track. Another thing I wanted to kind of update from my Disc for Dummies guide is that I think I overstated the use of Radiance. In Season 2, mainly due to our tier set, we could really lean heavily on Radiance because of the tier set extending its atonement by 2 seconds while also allowing us instant casts of the spell. So understandably, Disc Priests got used to leaning heavily on that spell, but now that we've lost all that, it's definitely a better idea to be applying long atonements with Renew, Power Word Shield, or Surge of Light procs to prepare for those heavy damage phases, and then use Radiance as necessary to extend those atonements and to benefit from its upfront heal. So I'd highly recommend having timers set up through an add-on like Bigwigs. I usually find an 8-second timer for dangerous damage abilities is about good. To help you make sure you've got big atonements running prior to damage going out, that's going to mean more global cooldowns spent on your damaging spells during your Mindbender and spent on smites getting them back. Along those same lines, I think in the original video I kind of threw Renew under the bus. Again, that was my tier set privilege showing and me relying way too heavily on Radiance for the last few months. Renew is a great way to spread long atonements on a single target, it's instant cast, it's castable on the move, and it costs less mana than a flash heal. Anyway, I think that kind of clears up what I wanted to update as far as my original Disc Priest guide goes. I still think the original guide is a good place to start for new Disc players, and if you haven't seen it yet, you may want to watch that and then come take another look at this video, as it's probably going to make a lot more sense for you. Anyway, I'm having a blast playing Disc Priest this season, guys. If you enjoyed the video and you made it this far, please make sure you hit that thumbs up, subscribe to see more of my WoW content in the future. Check out my live stream right here on YouTube, Tuesday, Thursdays, Saturday nights, 9 p.m. Pacific, also over on twitch.tv/DonkeyStorm. If you're interested in things like my UI or you'd like to support the channel, please check out that join button and become a channel member. It's the best way that you can support me. Thanks for watching, everybody. Happy healing.